What's up, everybody? It's HBT, man, with Straight Up Wrestling Show coming to you live, guys. Hey, right now I'm dealing with my cat, man, my little kitten. This joker won't stop. Madden, what's up? Madden Morganti is in the house. What's happening, man? Hey, right now, guys, I'll get into this in just a moment and about what we're about to talk about. But right now, I am dealing with this kitten that won't stop playing. Goodness sake, you get your little butt up. Goodness sake, you see this? You see this? You see this? Do you see this? Now you need to stop. Go on. Go on. All right, guys, what's going on, Madden and everybody else, man, that's coming in? Hey, welcome to the Straight Up Wrestling Show, guys. I'm going to talk about who is the best, guys. Who is the best? And, not just wrestling. Who's the best? Who's the best wrestling? Who's the best wrestling fans? That's what I'm asking. Not just for wrestling, but for other sports as well. Hey, and if you want to kick in actors or music too, you can actually do that too. I was going to put that, but I didn't want to put too much in the hidden. Probably when I got all in there. But, guys, basically, I'm going to talk about, hey, things that I liked when I grew up. My top three of each sport when I grew up. Now, wrestling was my number one. Wrestling was my number one sport. It was my favorite sport, which a lot of kids, when I was growing up in the 70s, man, 70s and 80s, a lot of us kids, wrestling was number one to us, guys. Then came football after that. Then came basketball and baseball, or baseball, basketball, in that order. But it usually probably was wrestling, football, and I'll say baseball, and then basketball. And then maybe late 80s, it became basketball when I was in my 20s, early 20s, in the late 80s, and in the 90s, still in my early 20s. It was basketball that came out of football. But I think football kind of like took over there a little bit for a little while. Then wrestling became popular again. But, man, wrestling was so popular, you couldn't help to say that was one of your favorite things. And everybody had their favorite wrestler. So right now, guys, goodness sake. Hold on for a second. I got to get this cat out of here, guys. I am still here, guys, but I got to get my cat out of here because my cat will not let me stop. The cat is just keep playing with me. Just continue to play. Goodness sake. Wow. That cat do not like you you doing anything else besides playing with her. So, wow. But let me get on back to what we was doing here, what we're talking about here. Now she's trying to get up under the door. I had to put out the door because my wife will get the cat, and my wife will she'll get the kitten, and she'll let the kitten go, and the kitten will come back in here and do the same thing. She'll have him for a little while, then he'll come back in here and do the same thing and interfere with me the whole time. But, guys, hey, back at you, man. But yeah, wrestling, football, basketball, and baseball. I'm gonna talk about who's my favorites when I was growing up, guys, in these sports. Straight up, man, and hopefully, hey, we'll have people listening tonight who's gonna come up with their favorites. I know people or a lot of people are sleeping. There are people out here, man, that's on the internet. They listening to other things. But hey, if you come across the Straight Up Wrestling Show, man, go ahead and hit that like. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up or whatever. Hey, share, and let everybody know that Straight Up Wrestling Show is in the house, guys. But yeah, let's go ahead and get on into this, guys. Hey, wrestling was my favorite thing, so I'm gonna go ahead and talk about wrestling first. But yeah, that was my favorite sport when I was growing up, 100%. And yeah, we called it a sport, and that's what it was looked at back then. Everybody looked at it as a sport. Straight up, man, it was looked at as a sport. And I'll go ahead and tell you who's my favorites. And this is getting into the mid 70s. When I was like 8 years old, 75, 76, 8, 9 years old. Man, my favorite wrestlers at that time, you had the Nature Boy Ric Flair, of course, was my number one favorite wrestler. And coming in number two was his arch nemesis. That was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. He was my number two. At that time, I say Ricky Steamboat was my favorite. I was more of a fan favorite guy, even though I like Ric Flair. He was a heel. I love Ric Flair. So it's between those two. I'm going to go ahead Ricky Steamboat first. And, Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair. But Ric Flair was the first wrestler that really got me into it, and I really liked him a lot. And then Ricky Steamboat debuted in 76. That was after Ric Flair, who already had been in the territory in the Mid-Atlantic championship territory for 2 years, and that was my favorite territory. He had been there for a couple years. He started in 74. In 76, we had Ricky Steamboat show up. And man, but in 75, Ric Flair was my favorite wrestler. 75 to 76, Ricky Steamboat showed up. He was my favorite wrestler. Him and Ric Flair was going back and forth. And it took a while before Ric Flair overtook Ricky Steamboat as my favorite wrestler. But those were my favorite two wrestlers. My third favorite wrestler at that time was Jack Briscoe. I say Jack Briscoe was. I was going to say Jumping Jim Brunzell. Jumping Jim Brunzell, very close. But I'm going to go with Jack Briscoe. Jack Briscoe was my third favorite wrestler at that time, man. Incredible. I was very impressed with his championship run, his NWA World Heavyweight Championship run. He had it for like a couple years, like from 75 to 77. And then Terry Funk took it from him. But, man, I used to love Jack Briscoe. And I loved Dusty Rhodes at that time, too. Dusty Rhodes I really loved. Got to the point where I couldn't stand him. This when him and Flair was going at each other in the 80s, man. I couldn't stand Dusty Rhodes. Around 79 is when I really stopped liking Dusty Rhodes, when he finally was able to get the World Heavyweight Championship, which, for years I rooted for him. From like 77 to like 79, I rooted for him to take the title off of Terry Funk and take the title off of Harley Race. He finally got it, but Ric Flair was coming up. Ric Flair was coming up doing such a phenomenal job, man. Everywhere he went, he was just outstanding, but especially here in the Carolinas. So I wanted Ric Flair to get that title. He became my favorite over Dusty Rhodes, because Dusty Rhodes, when I first saw him, I'm like, hey, that's my favorite wrestler. Love the style, love the big elbow and everything, even though I think Johnny Valentine, it didn't come nowhere near as good as what Johnny Valentine could deliver. But Dusty Rhodes had probably the second best in the business. And then third was Greg the Hammer Valentine. But, but yeah, when Dusty Rhodes won that title, for some reason, I'm talking to some friends. I had a lot of friends who loved Dusty Rhodes too. And I used to love Dusty Rhodes, but they was like, I was like, I think Flair can get him. But, they was all with Dusty Rhodes. So I started hating Dusty Rhodes, man. And Flair got him. He took the title off Dusty Rhodes, Dusty's first reign. It was Ric Flair's first reign, which he won it like 6 months after Dusty took it off, 5 or 6 months after Dusty took it off. Harley, or was it 8 months? Ric Flair took it off of Dusty, and man, it was smooth selling for Ric Flair ever since then. Even though he lost in 81, like a year and a half later, to Harley Race, and then he went for that Flair for the gold, and he regained it from Harley Race. But man, Ric Flair, that's where his legend took off. Incredible, man, incredible. But him and Dusty Rhodes had some great matchups. I used to love to watch Dusty Rhodes, even though I got to the point where I didn't like him when he finally came to the Carolinas. He was the booker and everything. I didn't like Dusty Rhodes. I really didn't. And that's because he had that big feud with Ric Flair. But I used to love to see him wrestle, loved him coming out talking and everything, and knew he would bring the excitement and knew what he meant to the business. Man, it was just incredible. All right, Black Rain 7920 says, what's up? As a kid, I was taking my vitamins and saying my prayers, brother. Oh, man. Oh, shit. You was watching the WWF, man, the WWE. That's what Christopher Burton, that's what he was watching. Even though he grew up in this area, man. He grew up in this area, which was pretty much, just everything, the NWA. He grew up in this area, but in this area, he grew up in South Carolina. But first wrestling match first thing he ever saw on TV was the night Hulk Hogan took the belt off of Iron Sheik on NBC. So that was his first exposure. He was, I think he said he was like 8 years old or whatever. On NBC. So that was his first exposure. He was exposed to that before he was exposed to the territories. So he was, he went right into that WWE land, Vince McMahon world. Chris went right into that. So he was doing the same thing. Black Rain 7920. Chris ended up with all the, all the paraphernalia of Hulk Hogan, had his mom buy all the merchandise and everything. So Chris got into all of that. So I can understand where you're going with that Black Rain 7920. And that's his favorite, man. Hulk Hogan, I could say Hulk Hogan probably his favorite wrestler till today, outside of The Rock. Right after The Rock. Hey, he named himself after The Rock as a podcaster. He calls himself the People's Podcaster. And so you know where that comes from, but after that People's Elbow. But he loves The Rock, man. He loves Hulk Hogan, and that one thing, I was crazy. I loved Hulk Hogan when I first seen him. That was back in 79, though. That's when he was a heel. I loved him as a heel. You know, when he became a fan favorite in '84, man, I was like, who is this dude? You know, hey, we was already 5 years in. I knew who he was. You know, I knew who he was, and I knew he would explode. I knew somebody was going to pick that up after the Rocky 3 appearance. If they didn't, I was like, they pretty foolish. And hey, look like somebody ended up being foolish, and that's Verne Gagne. You know, hey, he didn't capitalize on that, and man, shame on him. And then, you know, hey, Vince capitalized on it. He didn't like it, but hey, opportunity knocks, and Vince McMahon took over. Vince McMahon Jr., he took that opportunity and he ran with it. And I mean, he really ran with it straight up, man. That straight down the field. Hey, touchdown. Hey, juking and jiving. I mean, juking and joking defensive backs, linebackers, and defensive backs all the way to the end zone. Vince McMahon Jr., he ended up doing that thing. But man, yeah. So I will go with, like I said, I'm gonna go with my number one wrestler. Back, you know, because I say Flair came 78, 79. He became my favorite. Let's see, he overtook Ricky Steamboat. So I'm gonna go Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, and Jack Briscoe was my favorite 3 wrestlers in the business, man. Love that 100%. Those are my favorite 3 wrestlers. So I got to give you my favorite 3 tag teams. And now this is not my favorite tag team. I couldn't stand this tag team, but they are the best. So I'm going to go and say who was the best tag team at that time. And that was the guys over here to my right, man. Those guys right there, the Anderson brothers, man. Ole and Gene Anderson. I know everybody always talk about Ole Anderson and Ole and Arn Anderson. No. Ole and Gene Anderson, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, best tag team ever, guys. And I don't care. People can talk about the Road Warriors. I love the Road Warriors. Love them. You know, they came in, they did their thing, and I thought it was the greatest thing that I've ever seen as far as in tag team wrestling. But, you know, hey, when they started showing their vulnerabilities, you know, I started thinking back to the great tag teams that really, you know, that I grew up with, who could have really gave them a run and probably would have beat them 4 times out of 7 every time. Hey, the Anderson brothers would have beat them 5 out of 7 times easily. You know, Ricky Steamboat, Jay Youngblood, they would have defeated them in the 4 out of 7 series. I think the Steiners would have got them out. You know, Rick and Scott Steiner, even though I saw them after the Road Warriors, I know Rick and Scott Steiner would have beat them even at their prime. Both teams at their prime, Rick and Scott Steiner would have had the Road Warriors. Straight up. You know, the Road Warriors just stunned everybody coming in, boom, you know, that music and everything, running in and just beating the living crap out of teams and just destroying them. You know, they destroyed a lot of jobbers. But when they ended up having to take on teams, man, that could that was up to their caliber, that could compete with them. Nobody could compete with them as far as muscle as a tag team when it boils down to it, until they ran into Doom, you know, later on in their career. Now, if Hulk never would have had the drinking problem, they probably would have never had a problem as far as anybody matching up with them. But Doom pretty much ran them out of the NWA, out of WCW, and you know, they went on up to the WWE. But man, I mean, you know, hey, incredible tag team. You know, definitely the Road Warriors, LOD, incredible tag team. But man, hey, that team over here to my right, man, they are the number 1 tag teams that I've ever seen in the business. But my favorite tag teams, let's go with my favorite tag team that I ever saw, and that was Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. And speaking of Ricky Steamboat, like I say, he's one of my favorite singles, but man, he's one of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time. Anybody that he teamed up with, they won a world championship. If he teamed up with him for a number of years, but he won a world championship with a lot of different members as his tag team partner. So Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, though, was my favorite tag team that I ever seen. They was great. My number 2 tag team, favorite tag team, I'm gonna have to go with Paul Jones and Chief Wahoo McDaniel right here on the left-hand side of me, right here on the bottom. Paul Jones and Chief Wahoo McDaniel. That was my second favorite tag team ever to watch in wrestling. And I'm gonna go with my 3rd favorite tag team. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put them. Let's go with Paul Jones and Chief Wahoo McDaniel, my 3rd favorite to watch of all times. My number 1 tag team of all times, man, is Rick and Scott Steiner, the Steiner brothers. Those guys, woo! You talking about incredible? You talking about giving incredible moments and really, you talking about what a rush. You know, the Road Warriors always talking about what a rush. I never was more happy to see a tag team than I was the Rick and Scott Steiner. Those guys, they was outstanding, man. Love watching those two perform inside the ring. So those are my favorite three. So my favorite three wrestlers at that time, man, back in the 70s when I was growing up and into the early 80s or whatever, when I was growing up as a kid. Like I say, my favorite wrestlers, I'm gonna go with Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, and Jack Briscoe in the 70s and early 80s. My favorite three right there as far as singles wrestlers. My favorite tag teams to watch of all times is Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, Rick and Scott Steiner, and Paul Jones and Chief Wahoo McDaniel was my favorite three tag teams. Very exciting, very good. But I'm gonna go ahead and go with the number one tag team. The number one tag team I ever saw was those two guys right there, man. Ole and Gene Anderson, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, the best wrestler that I ever seen. I'm talking about overall, all around, who had every single thing that you need to be as a wrestler. That's Nature Boy Ric Flair. No ends, ands, or buts about it. I would say Harley Race is in that top. He's in my top three, top four. I say top four to top five. But Harley Race, hey, that's the reason I got him up there, because he was one of the wrestlers, one of the greats that I watched as I grew up. And also Randy Macho Man Savage, no ends, ands, or buts about it. But they didn't break my top three. I just put them up here and got the New Day back there because, hey, the New Day is what's happening right now, guys. Just wanted to put a picture up there to pretty much showcase wrestling. And, that, like I said, that was my favorite sport growing up. All right, Black Rain 79 says, every month, both WWF and NWA will come to Chicago at different arenas. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The NWA used to go to they used to go to the smaller arena because I think the WWF had the biggest arena. I think the NWA used to go to the Chicago Armory at the time. They used to go to the Armory. And the WWF went to that bigger arena. I can't even remember the name of that one, but they went to the bigger one, where the Bulls play. But the NWA always went to the Armory. But they went to the bigger one because they would, even though the NWA used to basically outsell them up in Chicago. But hey, Vince McMahon was smart. He used to get the bigger arenas. He would get a contract and say, you can't let the NWA in here. So Jim Crockett couldn't get in those buildings, man, when they was running, because Vince McMahon, he had it on lock, guys. I give it to him. He was smart to do that, straight up. He was a smart man to do that. But let me see. All right. But man, yeah, I appreciate you, Black Rain 7920, coming in. I appreciate you coming in, Madden, and everybody else who's coming in. And once again, man, as you come in, if you see me on, go ahead and hit like, share, join. If you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, you hit that like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, ding, 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 so people know when we're on. Like times like these, man, hey, unbelievable times, guys. Late at night, hey, here on the East Coast. I'm at 1:15 a.m. on the East Coast, guys. And hey, if you see me on Twitch, you do the same thing you do here on YouTube and on X, formerly known as Twitter, guys. Hit that like, share, tweet, and retweet straight up. But yeah, guys. So those are my favorites, man. Those are my favorites as far as the singles wrestlers. And I'm gonna go back over those, my favorite singles wrestlers. I gave you my top three. I gave you my favorite three. That was my favorite three. And I gave you my favorite three as the tag teams, guys. All right. So let me, I'll get to your comment in just a moment here. Black Rain 7920. Yeah, you say UIC Pavilion and Rosemont Horizon now. Okay. It's the Allstate Arena. Okay. Allstate Arena. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I remember when they changed the Rosemont Horizon and UIC Pavilion too. I remember both of those. Yeah, but the NWA, yeah, definitely. They used to go to the Chicago Armory, the National Guard or whatever. They used to go somewhere like that. And, maybe I think it was like a 7,000 seat arena at that time. That's the one that they used to run out of most of the time when they went up in Chicago. But that's a great big area for the NWA that and Buffalo. And, they used to run Meadowlands a good bit too. But, so those was the Jim Crockett, those areas was real good for Jim Crockett Promotions as far as getting him exposure up north. Those three areas right there, those three territories, was very, used to do well for Jim Crockett and Baltimore and Baltimore. He did really well up there in Maryland in certain spots. Okay. Let me see. All right, man. Let's go to my second favorite sport at that time, man. That was football. Who was my favorite football players, man? I'll go ahead and go with my favorite football teams at that time. Let's see. Well, hands down at that time. Now I can't stand them now. I hated them. I hate them. I mean, hey, no offense to anybody that likes this team, man. Hey, Dallas Cowboys, not my favorite team. I'm not one of these people that's against them all the time and that laugh at them and things like that. But Dallas was definitely my favorite team at that time. Right now, I can't say they're my favorite team, but at that time, they was my favorite football team, and my favorite football players in the world, man, was Roger Staubach, Tony Dorsett, both on the Cowboys, and who else? Let's see, Kenny the Snake Stabler with the Oakland Raiders. So I say Tony Dorsett, then Roger Staubach, and Kenny the Snake Stabler was my favorite three football players on offense. And I'll go ahead and I'll go with defense. My favorite football players on defense was Harvey Martin with the Dallas Cowboys defensive end, Too Tall Jones on the other side of him, and Jack Lambert for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Even though I couldn't stand the Steelers, I hated the Steelers, but he was my favorite favorite linebacker in the NFL at that time. So those were my favorite three players in the NFL at that time, on both sides of the ball, guys. So let me go back and see if I can recap that. Tony Dorsett, Rod Staubach, quarterback and running back for the Dallas Cowboys. And who did I say was number three? Kenny the Snake Stabler, quarterback for the Oakland Raiders, was my third favorite football player on the offensive side of the ball. Then you go on the other side of the ball, Ed Too Tall Jones, Harvey Martin, both defensive ends for Dallas Cowboys. I reversed that. Harvey Martin and Ed Too Tall Jones, and Jack Lambert, linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those was my favorites, guys. Those were my favorite football players at that time. And so, growing up. So let's roll over here to basketball, man. Let's roll over here to basketball. I'm talking about all pros, guys. This pro football, professional wrestling, guys, pro football, pro basketball, pro baseball. Who's my favorite basketball players at that time, man? Number one was Julius Erving, Dr. J, man, my favorite basketball player in the 70s, man, in the 80s too, early 80s, my favorite basketball player of all time. I'm not going to say he's the best. At that time, he was considered the best by most people, him and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But, Dr. J was my favorite basketball player, Julius Erving. Number two, I will have to go with Pistol Pete Maverick. Guy was great, man. The Pistol was an excellent basketball player. He was great. He was outstanding. Number three, I'm going to go with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Those are my three favorite basketball players when I started watching in the 70s, guys. And I'm not even going to get into the 80s, because if I do, then some things are going to change up a little bit. But I think Julius Erving still be number one. Now, who became, basically that stayed my favorite in the 80s. Even though Michael Jordan came on the scene, he ended up being my favorite basketball player. And he had to work for that. I couldn't stand Michael Jordan for a long time. But, hey, you have to, when it boils down to it, you have to love greatness. You have to, when you see greatness, you have to respect greatness. And, hey, I saw that. And so I had to respect it the same way Larry Bird. I hated Larry Bird more than anybody, man, because, hey, they was rivals with the 76ers. Couldn't stand Larry Bird. Anybody played with him. Kevin McHale, Danny Ainge, Robert Parrish, all of them wearing those black shoes for the Boston Celtics. Couldn't stand them, man. But, hey, you had to respect them. And I tell you, Larry Bird, one of my top three players of all time right now, and Michael Jordan is too. Those two guys, two of my top three, because, hey, had to respect them, man, because how great they were. Definitely had to respect them. And if I say this to this day, if Larry Bird never would have tore up his back, got out there and, started working on his own yard, tore up his back. Hey, we'll have a different conversation going on right now with this GOAT thing. You better believe that. That guy was incredible. Never, ever have I seen a basketball player, every time he got on the court, I don't care who was on the court with him or who they was playing against, I said the Boston Celtics was going to win because they had Larry Bird. Straight up, man. That white boy could play. That boy could play. He was nasty, man. He was nasty. He was that dog, no doubt. All right, man. So those are my favorite three basketball players right there. Okay, let's roll on over to baseball, guys. Baseball. Who's my favorite baseball players, man? First, I'm going to go with Steve Largent for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He was my favorite baseball player. Love Steve Largent, that guy, man. Like that man, he could go get it, but he was a go-getter, no doubt. Dale Murphy for the Atlanta Braves was my number 2 baseball player at that time, and I would say growing up. And Johnny Bench was my third. Let's see. Dale Murphy, of course, for the Atlanta Braves, and Johnny Bench played, he was the catcher at the time for the Cincinnati Reds. Those are my favorite 3 baseball players, man. Love each one of them. I love baseball, and those guys once, briefly I played baseball and I pitched and everything, used to love baseball, and I love baseball because of those 3 guys right there, guys. Let me see. What else do I have? Do I have any other sport? I don't even know what I got behind me, man. Let me see what I got behind me, as far as goodness sake, man. I'm trying to see what that is. I think those are the only sports I was going to talk about. Okay, so football, basketball, and baseball. That's what I talked about. So, guys, hey, that's pretty much it, man. But yeah, I appreciate everybody coming in. Guys, once again, checking this thing out. Hey, and once again, I'm going to say, hey, if you on Facebook, go ahead and hit that like, share, join. If you're on YouTube, hit that like, share, subscribe. Hit the notification bell, ding, 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 so you know we're on like times like these. And hey, if you do over on Twitch, you do the same thing that you do here on YouTube. We're live on Twitch, so go ahead and do that, man. Go ahead and hit that like button. Go ahead and subscribe over there on Twitch. And if you're on X, man, formerly known as Twitter, go ahead and hit that like, share, tweet, and retweet, guys. We definitely appreciate you guys, man, rocking with me this late at night. But yeah, I'm just talking about, hey, my favorite 3 guys, my top 3. Who are the best wrestling fans, not just for wrestling, but for other sports as well? Man, it's a lot of things we could talk about, sports as far as, hey, sports movies. What's my favorite sports movies? I'm going to go and say 101 by Robbie Benson. 101 by Robbie Benson, basketball movie. That's my favorite sports movie of all time. Number 2 is probably, I can't even remember the name of it. It's another basketball movie. I can't remember the name of it, but it had Bernard King in it. Started Bernard King, and they played for this school called Cadwalader. It's Fast. I can't remember what it was, but it was a great movie. But Varsity Blues, as far as football, I'm going to go with Varsity Blues, my favorite, and then Friday Night Lights. But there's a lot of things, man. As far as my top 3, I'm going to go with 101. I'm going to go with Varsity Blues, number 2. Then I'm going to go Friday Night Lights, number 3. I can't even think of that other basketball movie that I'm thinking of, but that's honorable mention. The one, hey, well, the guy who played in Welcome Back Kotter, which a lot of y'all won't even know about. Welcome Back Kotter was a TV show back in the 70s with John Travolta and this other guy, man, that played in that movie right there that I'm talking about. But that was a great movie. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go with 101 Robbie Benson. Let's see. I did say number 2. I said that was Varsity. Number 2 was Varsity Blues, and then Friday Night Lights. I'm going to replace Friday Night Lights with North Dallas 40, guys. North Dallas 40, that came out in the 70s. That was a great movie, guys. Hey, if you haven't seen it, definitely check that out. That was a great movie. So those are my top 3 favorite. Those are my top 3. Those are my favorite sports movies of all time. There's only been a few things out there as far as wrestling go. That was a movie that when I was growing up, man, came out in the early 70s. It was called The Wrestler. That movie was horrible. Don't get that one confused with the one that came out in the early 2000s with Mickey Rourke. That one was called The Wrestler 2, I believe. But mostly everything else I've seen as far as wrestling movies was horrible. The one that they did on the Von Erichs, last summer, that was pretty good. But the majority of them, man, haven't been too great. But hey, it is what it is. I just now I'm in the midst of watching that the Rock series. I started out watching it when it first came out, didn't like it at all, but now I like it. I definitely like it. One thing I don't like about it is I get to see what The Rock's dad was really about. Man, he wasn't really a good man. I didn't like that. And man, he just, he was one of my favorite wrestlers. Sweet Ebony Diamond, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Definitely top 6 guys as far as my favorite categories. Rocky Johnson, when he was Sweet Ebony Diamond over here in the Carolinas, man, he was outstanding, incredible wrestler, probably the best black wrestler that I ever seen in my life. But man, this guy, the way he treated his wife, the way all the lies and everything. Hey, I don't really rock with that. So I'm really shocked at the things that I see about him. And I'm checking out this Vince McMahon documentary, man. Very interesting. I'm about to get back into that. I may go ahead and watch that here in just a minute. I should have watched that live and I talked about that, but I'm gonna do that a little bit later, man, when I have more people, around. But I'm on the 4th one. I just now got finished with the 3rd episode of Vince McMahon, that Vince McMahon saga, and a lot of the things that Vince McMahon did, man. I was just like, wow, it made me revisit a lot of things because, really I didn't pay a whole bunch of attention to it because I really wasn't a big Vince McMahon fan at that time. Never was a big Vince McMahon fan, even though I followed the WWE. I followed certain wrestlers there because they swallowed up the territories and they took a lot of guys who were my favorites, man. A lot of heroes of mine. They took them over into their territories, and a lot of those guys were wrestling for Vince. So of course, I followed people like Roddy Piper, who came through the territories. I followed even Jimmy Snuka. Let's see, Hulk Hogan. He came through the territories. I followed him, but I did not like hey, take your vitamins, brother, and all that stuff. I couldn't really get with that, but I still followed them, followed Randy Savage, Tony Atlas, all those guys, man, Junkyard Dog, those guys that went through there. I would go over there and I would follow their career, see what he was doing, especially, Rick Martel, man. I definitely was following those guys to see what they was doing. Very interesting. So that's what made the WWF interesting to me. It wasn't all the other antics that was going on in the WWF. What's going on, Jay Stunner? Jay Stunner's in the house. What's up, Jay? But yeah, man. So yeah, I really didn't get into the WWF like that, like a lot of people did, man. I was always a territory guy, and, big NWA guy and an AWA guy too. I did like the AWA, even though Vern Gagne seemed like he couldn't get off those wrestlers when he got old. He didn't really understand it. He didn't get it, and that's why he got bypassed. But he had a very good product, man. He really did. The AWA, they had some great wrestlers over there, man. It's just they waited a little too late. He waited a little too late before he pulled the trigger, and he let Hulk Hogan go over into the WWF, even though Hulkamania had started already in AWA, but he kept jerking him around instead of letting this guy end up winning that title from Nick Bockwinkel. And when he actually won the title from Nick Bockwinkel, he did a switcheroo on him and gave the belt back to Nick Bockwinkel. And that's when Hulk Hogan said, forget it. All right. Okay. Arn Anderson was okay. Jamie says, Jay Stunner says, Arn Anderson was always my favorite. Yeah, Arn Anderson something, man. Arn Anderson something. I remember when he first started up, as Matt Lundy over there in Florida, and then he came to the Georgia Championship Wrestling. He was Arn Anderson, teamed up with Matt Bourne. Him and Matt Bourne was incredible, guys. You asked me, him and Matt Bourne was a better tag team than Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. They were. It's just a lot of people don't know about them, especially, the younger generation. They don't know about them. But, yeah, Arn Anderson and Matt Bourne was incredible. They was incredible guys, very fast. One thing about them that made them so good was Matt Bourne was so much like Tully as far as his attack mode. The attack mode was just, the speed and everything was there. This is before he became Doink the Clown and everything like that, and, got a little chubby, whatever. He had that speed. He was like a mix between Mad Dog, Buzz Sawyer, and Mr. Wrestling 2. He was just incredible, man. Matt Bourne was incredible to watch. One of the best wrestlers at that time in the business in the early 80s, man. With him and Arn Anderson teamed together. But Matt Bourne and Arn Anderson was a great tag team. Man, it's too bad that they didn't get to pretty much live the thing out. Now, would they ended up being as great as Arn and Tully? I don't know. Arn and Tully, that different style, the different styles that they had, but they styles meshed very well. May have made them one of the greatest tag teams of all time. But no, that Tully with Arn is not. It was a better team than Arn and Ole. So he upgraded with Tully over Ole because Ole had got a little longer in the tooth. He got a little older, but Ole Anderson was tough, rugged. He was a great tag team wrestler. But him and Gene Anderson makes the best tag team. That's the greatest tag team ever, man. And that's the Minnesota Wrecking Crew right there. It was Ole, Gene Anderson, and Lars Anderson. Another brother of theirs, Lars Anderson. But Lars had retired. But the biggest success story of the Andersons was Ole and Gene Anderson. Now, Ole Anderson won a lot of world championships with a lot of different wrestlers, guys. Him and Stan Hansen was a great. That's another guy when Ole and Stan Hansen teamed up. That was a great tag team. Stan left right after the Road Warriors came in when Ole actually needed somebody to help handle the Road Warriors. Stan was gone, so that was kind of crazy, man. But yeah, that would have been a great matchup to see those guys go up against each other. All right, let's see. Black Reign 79-20. Do you remember the movie Body Slam from 86 or 87 with Piper, Captain Lou, and Face from the A-Team? Yes, I do. Black Reign 79-20. It was okay, man. It was okay. That's all I can really say. It was okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like No Holds Barred, which was horrible. All right, Jamie. Jamie Howell says I like watching Bob Armstrong and Harley Race. Yeah, Bob Armstrong, man. Bullet Bob Armstrong, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and definitely Harley Race, man. Harley Race was just incredible. He was just incredible. Hard-nosed, man, and just didn't take a step back from nobody, man. Just one of the toughest guys ever in the business, and that's 100% legit, not just in wrestling, just 100% legit. Somebody that you didn't want to cross out on the streets, guys. This guy could actually do what he did in the ring, man. So I have a lot of respect for Harley Race. Harley Race was incredible, man. And he's missed. He is 100% missed. And to a lot of people, he's the number one NWA world champion of all time. And that's saying a lot, guys, because you have to look at the storied history of that title. And I'm not talking about all the guys who's had it since Rick had it. Rick was the last one who held that NWA World Heavyweight Championship where it was legit, a legit World Heavyweight Championship. Now, of course, Barry Windham, when he got it, it still was called the NWA World Heavyweight Championship and / WCW. So you can actually throw him in there. But Ric Flair, man, outside of Ric Flair, because Ric Flair is my number one. Harley Race is my number two. Rick surpassed everything Harley did. But Harley, man, Rick, outside of Rick's charisma, everything that he brings to the table, like I say, he brings everything to the table that you want in a wrestler today. You want a wrestler to sell. If you want somebody who's going to be a showman, who's going to be a salesman, somebody that you can put on the poster and say, that's a wrestler, that's somebody who's going to bring people in just by him opening up his mouth, it's the Nature Boy Ric Flair, man, and the things that he do. In the ring. Just incredible. But Harley Race, man, it's just something about him. And you believe every word he said, everything that he said. And then if you watch them in action, you're like, he's going to do this in the ring, and nobody can do anything to stop him from doing it either. And he, just like Flair, everything was predictable. You knew what was coming. But hey, the bottom line is, hey, could you stop it? And most people could not stop it straight up. But that guy, man, hard nose, and I've seen some of the greatest matches as far as hard-nosed matches, man, hardcore matches going head-to-head, just battling it out brutality-wise, man. It was him against Dusty Rhodes. I say his matches with Dusty Rhodes was even better. The ones that he had with Dusty Rhodes up in Florida fighting for that World Heavyweight Championship was rougher than the ones that Ric Flair had with Dusty Rhodes, straight up, man, because those matches were just flat-out brutal. Because it was no playing around. It was no sitting there begging. No. Like Rick used to be like, no. Trying to keep you. These guys would just go at each other, man. Just like two gladiators, just going at each other. Hey, no dancing, none of that. None of that with those two guys. Those guys was incredible to watch. All right, man. But Bullet Bob Armstrong, just great, man, and great. Had some great kids, great wrestlers. Brad Armstrong, one of the greatest wrestlers I ever seen in my life. Brad Armstrong should have been world champion if he had the charisma on the microphone, because back then you needed to talk. And that's one thing that they said Brad couldn't do. But Brad, man, is probably he's probably one of the top 3 wrestlers I ever seen in my life. Overall, he had the entire package, Brad Armstrong. All right, let's see. And so, yeah, and Bob, Bullet Bob, and we know he had Road Dogg, one of his sons, Steve Armstrong too. So all his sons was great wrestlers. Yeah, so big ups to Bob Armstrong, man. So I'm glad that you said that, Jay. All right, Jamie said I heard that the Grinch was gonna be at CMW show coming up. Yeah, I heard that too, Jamie. I heard that too, Jay. I heard that too, Stunner. Can't wait to see the Grinch, man. I can't wait to see the Grinch. That's going to be outstanding, man. That's going to be outstanding. But, yeah. So, wow. But, yeah, I'm glad that you went ahead and talked about that. But, yeah, Arn Anderson, man, he's Arn Anderson. He definitely deserves his props. And when it comes down to wrestling, I say in the last 25 years, I'm going to say last 30, 35 years, he's one of the top. I say one of the top 15 figures in wrestling, man, in the last 30 years is Arn Anderson. Definitely Arn Anderson. As far as tag teams, Arn and Tully in the last 30 years, they definitely have a argument that they are the number 1 tag team that's, within the last 30, 40 years. They was the number 1 tag team. They did a lot in professional wrestling, but you definitely, as far as who ranks up there with them is Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express. I say those 3 are those 3 did the most outside of the Steiners. I got to throw the Steiners in there, but the thing about it, Arn and Tully was Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express was together the longest. Midnight Express, and then I say the Steiners, Arn and Tully. Whew, man, wow. Yeah, Arn and Tully, they at least number 3. You got to put them at least number 3 in the last 40 years. As far as tag teams all time, they're in the top 10. Great tag team. All right, let's see. What else, man? What else can I really get into here? But, yeah, I think that pretty much covered it, guys. Like I said, hey, all these guys that I have right here, man, on the promo, on the promo, I went ahead and pretty much laid it out how what I think about these guys and how I view them. Harley Race, one of the best ever in professional wrestling. When it boils down to it, if you want to go skill-wise, I'm going to go number 2. The Anderson Brothers, Minnesota Wrecking Crew, number 1 tag team of all time. Paul Jones, Chief Wahoo McDaniel, 2 of the greatest singles wrestlers of all time and tag team wrestlers. Randy Macho Man Savage, the top 10 wrestler. One of the greatest, most known wrestler of all time. The New Day right behind me. Hey, one of the best stories I've seen in wrestling in a long time. Since the 80s, man. Since the 80s, probably 90s, 80s, early 90s. Gave you my favorite basketball players, my favorite baseball players, and my favorite 3 football players. Gave it to you in 3s, guys. So, hey, if you like what you hear, go back and check it out. Go back and check it out. As far as these my favorite 3 wrestlers, like I said, I'm going to lay it out again. Nature Boy Ric Flair, Rick Steamboat. And who else did I have as my number 3 wrestler? Ric Flair, Rick Steamboat, and Ric Flair, Rick Steamboat. Who did I say was my number 3 wrestler of all time, man? Goodness sake, I'm about to go back and check that out myself, man. Now I'm really thinking about that. Ric Flair, Rick Steamboat, Ric Flair, Rick Steamboat. Goodness sake, I can't even think about that. I can't even come up with that. Now, as far as my favorite tag teams that I ever seen, number 1, Ricky Steamboat, Jay Youngblood. Number 2, the Steiner Brothers, and number 3, Chief Wahoo McDaniel and Paul Jones. My number 3 wrestler, man, goodness sake. Oh, Jack Briscoe. It was Jack Briscoe. Yeah, Jack Briscoe was my number 3 wrestler of all time, guys. But hey, I appreciate everybody coming in here, man, rocking with the Straight Up Wrestling Show once again. And hey, let everybody know, man. Let everybody know that the Straight Up Wrestling Show is rocking. My man Christopher Burton is not on tonight, but we'll be doing some shows tomorrow. Definitely doing some shows tomorrow. probably going to be in Boiling Springs tomorrow night. I'm not exactly sure. I got to see what's going on with him. So we might be in Boiling Springs tomorrow night, and I will come on and talk about the show that they will be doing tomorrow in Boiling Springs. Me and Chris, we will preview that show, but most likely we'll be going down to Boiling Springs. The past few weeks, we haven't been able to go down there. He's been working a lot of hours, man, 12-hour days on Fridays. And, I was working the past couple weeks before that, on Halloween, right before that, the day of, before, they had their Friday show. And my horn went out, man. Went out on my Subaru. I do not like traveling a long way without my horn. So I haven't got that fixed, took it to get fixed, a couple weeks ago. And guy didn't get it on the diagnostics, come back. He told me to come back. He was off that day, the guy who usually works on my car. So I got to get that up there so I can get my horn fixed so I can go travel and be safe out here, man. I need my horn straight up. Yeah, so most likely we will be down there tomorrow. Check that out, guys, and pretty much do some commentary on that show. All right, let me see what my man Jay Stoner said here, right here at the end here. Okay. The Black Rain 7920 said, I think you said the Godfather. Oh my gosh, the whole train. I mean, I don't think so, but hey, the Godfather, very entertaining, man. Hey, I like that. I may have, I like him a lot as Papa Shango too, man. I love him as Papa Shango. He used to crack me up, Black Ray. He used to crack me up. That joke would be out there. Bap boy, then he'd do something, man, put a spell on somebody, man. He'd go all crazy and stuff. That joke was flat out crazy, man. Papa Shango, the Godfather, man. The Godfather. I love that gimmick. That was a great gimmick. One of the best. And hey, this guy was a legit tough guy too. Legit tough guy, man. Somebody you didn't want to mess with, somebody you didn't want to cross. Was the Godfather. It's a big dude, man, but a nice guy. So yeah, I like the Godfather straight up, man. I'm glad, appreciate you joining in with that Black Ray 7920 with the Godfather, man. That cracked me up. That cracked me up. But I appreciate you coming in, man. Appreciate my man Jamie Howard, Jay Stunner coming in here, Matt and Morgante coming in here, guys. Appreciate all you guys coming in and everybody that came through, man, that just came through and visited and hey, rock with me a little while. Definitely appreciate you 100%. But guys, I am gonna get off of here, man. This is a cold night here in South Carolina. I know it's cold up there in Chicago, man. Out in up north, anywhere up north. I know it's cold out there. But yeah, it's cold here. And man, so I'm gonna get off. Make sure everybody stays warm here in the house. And I will check you guys later, man. Stay straight up. Peace.